I'd like to share with you the story of my grandaunt, my grandmother's cousin. I'm in the process of writing about her for the Australasian Pentecostal Studies Journal. And I've entitled this talk "To the Ends of the Earth, from Melbourne to Shanghai to Vancouver." This talk is about Jessie Wong, and pictured here on this slide is the current premises that sits on 242 Little Bourke Street. 242 Little Bourke Street was where Jessie was born and raised. It was formerly a shop house with the meeting hall for the Kong Chu Society on the upper level. So as I was researching Jessie's story, I realised that there was a lot that Jessie and I had in common. So we're both kin and kindred spirits. Now, the way that I found out about Jessie was really through artefacts like this photo that I've got pictured here. So this photo used to sit above the piano in the sunroom at my home, and it is a picture from my grandmother's wedding. You will be able to see here in the middle is my grandmother, and to her left is my grandfather, who I never met. So this is Frank Lu Sang, and this is Honor Onching Wong. And my mother had told me that her mother, in turn, was born in Australia, but at that time I had never really thought much about it. So it was only about 3 or 4 years ago that I started wondering, who was my grandmother, and how long has my family been in Australia? And I think these questions arose from the fact that I had become a father and wanted to pass some of this information on to my own children. So to find out more about my grandmother, I went to the Birth, Deaths and Marriages and got this extract of my grandmother's wedding. So in this marriage extract, you can see that my grandmother's father was Wong Shu-hu, and her mother was Moi Si, and that my grandmother had been born in Melbourne, Australia. Having the name of Wong Shu-hu led me to discover more about my family tree. So you can see here that I'm at the bottom right, and I am the son of Elizabeth Lu Sang, who married my father, Ng Ho Han, and my mother was the daughter of Frank Lu Sang and Honor Onching Wong. And then you can see up here that Wong Shu-hu had two brothers, Wong Shigin and Wong Shu-tu. Wong Shigin was married to Chow Ho and had a daughter called Jessie Wong To. This information led me to do a bit more research into Wong To, and I discovered via Ancestry.com some shipping records from 1946. So in these shipping records, it lists Wong To here with an English name, Jessie, and the age lined up with what I have subsequently found out about Jessie, and it recorded that she was a missionary leaving Shanghai to go to the United States. And this was very interesting for me and resonated with me because I had previously held aspirations to do mission work in China and in fact in Shanghai earlier on in my life. And so I really wanted to know more about Jessie Wong. So pictured in this slide is the Globe Hotel, which was taken in around 1860 or 1870. And the Globe Hotel sits on the corner of Little Bourke and Swanston Street, where the ANZ Bank now is located. And in the bottom right hand of the corner, and this might be obstructed by the video, is 242 Little Bourke Street. And at that time it would have been 49.5 Little Bourke Street. So what I found when I was digging up more information about Jessie was that she was born at 242 Little Bourke Street. She was the youngest of 3 daughters, and she had converted to Presbyterianism at about the age of 10. So this is Jessie Wong's birth extract, and you can see that she was born on the 2nd of September 1892 at 242 Little Bourke Street. This is her first name, Gu Hong, and her father's name, Wang Shigin, and her mother, Chao Ho. And so pictured here is a photo taken from this Chinese mission school in Little Bourke Street, which was run by the Presbyterian Women's Mission Union. This photo was taken in around 1900 or 1910, and Jessie would have been about 7 or 8 years of age, perhaps 9 years of age, and perhaps is one of the children who is pictured here in this photo. And here you have a picture of me, taken during my university days when I used to sing with the Trinity College Chapel Choir. So I became a Christian while I was singing with this college back in, I think, 1996. And so Jessie and I both share a Christian faith as well. So Jessie appears to have been the daughter of quite a privileged merchant. Wang Shigin was noted to be Melbourne's best-known Chinese merchant, and he had a prominent place in the Melbourne Chinese community. He appears to have been bilingual, so was able to speak both Chinese and English, which meant that he was a representative for the community. So you can see here at the bottom right is a picture of Jessie's father, Wang Shigin, and as a community leader, Wang Shigin in fact became a Chinese civil rights activist and has been noted in a few PhD theses, notably Ian Welsh's Alien Sun and Mayfen Guo's, or Guo Mayfen's Urban Elite. So certainly Jessie had a privileged background. What happened was that in 1901, Wang Shigin's brother, Wang To, died and left his possessions to Wang Shigin. And then in 1908, my great-grandfather, Wang Hu, also died. And my great-grandfather had 6 children, of whom my grandmother was the second youngest. Their mother died the following year in 1909, and pictured here is her grave, which we've subsequently found in the Boroondara Cemetery. And so this was the context for the 1910 return to China, which Wang Shigin organised for both his family and for Wang Hu's family. Now, whether Wang Shigin was supposed to make this move permanent or just temporary, it's unclear. But what happened was that he died the following year in 1911. And so here is the newspaper article which was written in the Bulletin in 1912, and it reads, Melbourne's best-known Chinese merchant, Wang Shigin, has gone for good. After about 40 years in Australia, a consuming desire seized him to visit his native village of Chong in the Canton district. He went, and the long-lost smell struck him, and his present address is in the bosom of Confucius. And I think this little article demonstrates that there was a certain nasty tone to it, and it shows that there were people in Sydney who didn't like Wang Shigin and probably his family. Now, whether this was motivated by a personal vendetta or whether it was just the general racist attitudes and not liking people speaking up against the White Australia policy, I'm not sure. So following her father's death in 1911, Jessie stayed in China, as far as I know, and she would have spent her early adult life in China during the early Republican era. Moving to village life in China would likely have been a bit of a culture shock for Jessie, having grown up in Melbourne. And she eventually moved to Shanghai in 1919. Whilst in Shanghai, she found work teaching at a mission school, teaching English, and this would have been a result of her quite privileged upbringing in some ways, of having been schooled in Australia. And pictured here in this slide is St John's College, which was one of the mission schools which was established by the Americans in Shanghai. And I'm not sure whether Jessie taught at this school, but this is just one of those types of schools that provided education to the elite in Shanghai at the time. During her time in Shanghai, Jessie converted to Pentecostalism through the faith healing of an American missionary. And subsequent to that, it appears that she set up a Christian mission called the Cantonese Gospel Mission in 1923. What happened to this, gospel mission is an area for future research. Whereabouts in Shanghai did it operate, and what is known about it? So in 1937, the Japanese invaded China and occupied Shanghai, and during this time, Jessie's mission building was actually bombed by an air attack from the Japanese. Jessie continued to stay in China. She didn't try to return to, as far as I know, she didn't try to return to Australia. And she, in fact, helped some missionaries to flee the Japanese early on during the war. One of these missionaries here is pictured on the left here in this newspaper article. Jessie helped Mrs. McClurg here to escape to Manila and then to the United States in 1937. We know from Jessie's later preaching that she destroyed her paperwork that would have shown that she was a British subject to escape any reprisals from the Japanese. This was probably after 1941 when the Japanese invaded Malaya and bombed Pearl Harbor. And she didn't speak English for a number of years. After the war, she went on and stayed with the McClurgs. So this is Reverend McClurg here in upstate New York, and did a number of had a number of speaking engagements in churches in the New York area. So pictured in the bottom right here is the SS General Meigs, which is the boat that that Jessie left China on. And also pictured here is the book cover from Helen Zia's book, Last Boat Out of Shanghai, which gives a bit of a context to what was happening in those chaotic years between the Japanese leaving China or being defeated and the communists and the subsequent civil war between the communists and the Kuomintang. So Jessie, as I said, had left China in 1946. She arrived in the United States and spent a few months speaking on the East Coast of the USA. And between 1946 and 1950, it's unclear exactly what Jessie was doing, but she does reappear in Hong Kong later in 1950, and this again is another area for future research. Jessie appears to have reappeared in Hong Kong in at least 1950, if not earlier. She ministered for a time to the Chinese refugees. So again, to give context, with the fighting between the communists and the nationalists between 1945, 46 to 1950, or 1949, 1950, a lot of people, a lot of Chinese were fleeing China for the relative safety of Hong Kong, where the British ruled. And so Jessie was ministering to these refugees. There's a newspaper report that shows that she was running a church from the King's Theatre, which is pictured here in Hong Kong. And it describes services where they had over 1,000 people attending. Jessie left Hong Kong in 1950 to start ministry in Canada, and the ministry in Hong Kong is another area for further research. After leaving Hong Kong to go to Vancouver, Jessie continued her ministry to the Chinese refugees in Canada. She was associated with a number of different churches, including the Cantonese Pentecostal Church of Vancouver, the Christ Church of China in Vancouver, the Lingliang Worldwide Evangelistic Mission, the Calgary Chinese Church as well. And the picture here is of the Calgary Chinese Church, which Jessie helped to plant. Jessie's ministry in Canada is another area for future research. In 1954, Jessie had a speaking tour of Australia. The speaking tour was mainly conducted in Sydney and Western New South Wales, in the towns such as Orange, Dubbo, Parkes, Molong, among others. She also spent a short time in Melbourne, and this is a newspaper article that's advertising Jessie's preaching at the Richmond Temple, which was one of Australia's largest Pentecostal churches back in the 1950s. Further on the left here, you can see this is a photo of Jessie at the Parkes Assemblies of God Church, pictured with David Mychalk, and above is a page from David Mychalk's autograph book, which was written by Jessie herself. And you can see here that Jessie's written in Mandarin 我真是爱耶稣，我真是爱耶稣，我真是爱耶稣，因为他先爱我 which means I really love Jesus, I really love Jesus, I really love Jesus, because he loved me first. And it's dated 1954, August 12th. It's not clear why Jessie came to Australia in 1954, whether it was to see if she could find work here in Australia as a missionary or as a preacher, or whether it was just a family visit. But there's no oral history of Jessie visiting either my grandmother or my grandmother's sister, Elsie, during her 1954 visit to Australia. In November, she returned to Canada, and she continued to minister to the Cantonese-speaking migrants and refugees in Vancouver. She retired at some point in time and died at the ripe old age of 101 in Calgary, very far away and on the other side of the earth from 242 Little Bourke Street. And this is the newspaper article which was advertising her funeral service. So what is Jessie Wong's legacy? Well, I think that Jessie Wong is significant because she's the daughter of a significant Chinese Australian in his own right, Wong Shigin, and this presentation outlines her significance to the Australian, to the Chinese, and to Canadian history. She came from a privileged background. She was educated in English. She was relatively wealthy. She overcame significant hurdles, the systemic racism in Australia, the prevailing sexism of the time, the cultural attitudes that she would have battled against as a single woman. She established and maintained a Christian ministry during a significant time in China's history during the Republican era, the Japanese occupation and World War II, in arguably China's most significant city at the time, Shanghai. Her ministry spanned 3 continents, Asia, North America, and Oceania. And in addition to Mary Yung, who was also a Australian-Chinese Pentecostal missionary, she further demonstrates that Chinese-Australian women played a significant role in the development of the Pentecostal movement within China. Sadly, their contributions have been mainly overlooked or ignored until the 21st century. Jessie Wong also provides an example of what Chinese Australians can achieve when the bamboo ceiling is lifted or burned, and she might inspire future generations to achieve greatness. And there are a number of research leads that require follow-up. And so just on that achievement of greatness, this goes back to my own story, and this pictured here is my eldest daughter, Hannah, sitting on her mother's shoulders with the tagline, prophesy to the generations. And I think Jessie's story will help to propagate those generational stories. So in putting together this research, I'd just like to acknowledge a few people. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge Sophie Couchman for her initial research guidance into the Wong family. I'd also like to thank Dr. David Mychalk for providing oral history and the photo and autograph book from Jessie Wong's 1954 preaching tour. I'd like to thank Kathy Keane, a long-lost DNA match who helped with some of the Canadian research into Jessie Wong. I'd also like to thank Chris Palmer, the Presbyterian from the Presbyterian Church of Victoria Archives, the Reverend James Craig of the Pentecostal Assemblies of God of Canada Archives, and Glenn Gurr, the Reference Archive archivists from the Flower Pentecostal Heritage Centre, who all provided reference materials. In terms of further directions, as I mentioned, this Jessie Wong story has been accepted for publication in the Australasian Journal of Pentecostal Studies, and further research needs to be conducted to fill in many of the gaps which are still there. This is a list of my references and some more of the references.